Marriage models God's love relationship to us. So we have to stop thinking about marriage as just a benefit to me and how it ministers to me. Instead, look at how it builds God's kingdom. Sometimes love is not easy. Aren't there lots of things about what love is called to do that's about denying ourselves? Right? How can we turn marriage around and say that marriage is about me rather than me giving? I'll share with you 5 commitments that can safeguard your marriage. 5 commitments that can safeguard your marriage. To keep it moving in God's direction. First, seek God. Make Him the center. When you're drawing your relationship from God, when you find your love in Him, then you have something to give. When God's the center for you, you find it changes your thinking about how you relate to another person. It changes your willingness to sacrifice for that other person. You find something that happens when God's inside that gives you ability to forgive, to be humble. So, seeking God, because He will fulfill. And then you have completeness that you can share with someone else. Since I shared with you that you can't expect conflict-free marriage if you're going to live in a world that's sin, then fight fair. What does that mean? It means that in your whole process, look for something that's a win-win for both of you. Look for an avenue, a means by which the other person needs are met. Not to look for it just for yourself. That's part of that being God sacrificing, isn't it? Number 3, have fun. Enjoy it. God gave us a journey, and part of that journey is to enjoy our marriage as we're taking those steps. Amen? Number 4, stay pure. Making a commitment to someone else means excluding others. And staying pure starts with what we do in our mind and moves to every choice that we make along the way. Stay pure. And 5, never give up. I used the picture of the story of Hosea and Gomer to say, oftentimes we say, oh, I fell out of love. In reality, it's saying, I've chosen to stop loving. In reality, it's saying, I've chosen to stop loving. Never give up, because God didn't call you to be loved. Instead, like Hosea and Gomer, Hosea continued to love, even when she walked away, even when she made a mistake. Never give up on the other person. Keep moving forward. As far as processing the text and walking through each of the texts, I want to change the order around a little bit, because I'm afraid if we start with this order, we'll never really connect with what's taking place. Because in our mind, something clicks immediately with some of the wording that's here. So I'm going to change and start with husbands instead of wives. Are you with me? Are you with me?
Yeah.
We're going to start with a text that talks about husbands loving, wives submitting, children obeying. Those were the 3, right? So we're going to start with husbands. Husbands love your wives and do not be embittered against them. Husbands love your wives was again an incredible statement for the time. You have to take it within its culture. Women were property. They were things to minister to you. In the societal expectation, there was no commitment on the man's part to do anything for the woman. When men are oppressed, it's a tragedy. When women are oppressed, it was just considered tradition. The purpose was not to turn women into slaves, but deliver them from being property. God's command in this whole thing was to change what went on for women. When God commanded the husbands to love their wives, it wasn't in a way of making the wives lesser. It was in a way of elevating the husband's role to being God's role. Guide your wife so faithfully and righteously that you keep her holy and blameless. Never lead her into a dangerous situation. Loving her, saying, take the time to be faithful to her. It says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church in Ephesians, the parallel passage. Husbands, love your wife just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her, so that he might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of the water of the word, that he might present to himself the church in all her glory, having no spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and blameless. So husbands ought also to love their own wives as their own bodies. He who loves his own wife loves himself, for no one has ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ also does the church, because we're members of his body. You know, I start thinking about what is the difference between submit and love? If love, by definition, is putting somebody else before yourself, isn't that what we would term submission? Help me. Isn't love putting somebody else before yourself? It's selflessness, right? So in essence, just as what's being said here for husbands to love their wives, it's saying, husbands, you must put the woman before yourself, just as Christ did before the church and was willing to sacrifice everything and give himself in order for her gain. It was a call for a complete sacrifice for someone else's benefit, your wife's. I start thinking about that whole picture, and we turn it around to be husbands should be an authority so that they get ministered to. That's not what it says. Not from the husband's side. At least I shouldn't be hearing an amen from the women. Right? Christ uses the term just as Christ loved the church and gave himself. And gave himself. Why? Because when you love, there's a response that comes from love. And husbands were to be the kingpin of the home, to demonstrate love, so that it became the common way of a home function. In Romans 2:4 it says, or do you think lightly of the riches of his kindness and tolerance and patience, not knowing that the kindness of God leads you to repentance? Change lives. How will the family change? The family will change when the husband decides to love his wife as God loved the church. Because that's